Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Orphan Black, Season 4, Episode 10, From Dancing Mice to Psychopaths. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Orphan Black, so I'll have to give a spoiler warning for Orphan Black up to the Season 4 finale. If you haven't seen all of Season 4, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So I'm not going to beat around the bush. I found this episode to be quite disappointing as a season finale. Not that I thought it was a bad episode. It's, an episode that was good enough, but typically finales tend to be some of the best of the season and wrap up all the storylines running throughout the season in an exciting and epic way, and I definitely don't think they did that here. And because Season 4 has been so amazing and so much better than the previous seasons, I suppose I was expecting the finale to live up to that standard, which I don't think it did. I realize we might be done with the Beth flashbacks, but she was a reoccurring theme throughout this season. I would have appreciated more of a reference to her. MK was also a major feature of this season, so I would have liked to have seen her as well, and she didn't appear at all. And I was expecting a lot more wrap-up of the plot lines of the season, but instead they left a lot of things open and more than I would have liked. So we start the episode with a flashback scene to when Delphine was shot, and I think I need to go back and watch that original scene because I can't remember it very well and how much they showed. If I remember correctly, it wasn't that much. Anyway, we see more here, like it was Detective Duco that shot her, and Crystal was there to witness this. And in fact, she actually saved her life by distracting Duco unintentionally, but allowing time for those guys in the van to show up and led by Evie's doctor that we saw in the last episode, who apparently is an important figure to Neolution, called Dr. Van Lier, who takes Delphine away and saves her life. Now, this scene was interesting enough, but I wasn't particularly blown away by it. I don't think they planned for this all along and decided to just write it in just for the season, and the whole thing seems a bit too soap opera-y to me. Anyway, we see Delphine being cared for by that old bearded guy Rachel has been seeing in her visions, which is pretty much exactly what I was expecting to see. So again, I didn't find the opening shocking or groundbreaking in any way, but it was okay. So next we see Cosima celebrating as she finds a cure to cure all of the clones, and she hugs Susan and calls Sarah, and they're all celebrating the good news and they're all happy, cheering, happy music like everything's great. But to me, it was all too obvious that it wasn't, and something bad was going to happen and prevent them from ever having the cure. As when something all, too happy happens like this, it usually is too good to be true. And in fact, as soon as Susan was like, "Oh, that's great, Cosima. Now I'm just going to go over here now. I'll be right back." So it was so obvious to me that Susan was up to no good and was going to do something to sabotage Cosima, and she was so naive not to see it. So I wasn't the least bit surprised when Cosima suddenly gets locked out of her computer program and her internet freezes. It was like, no duh. And I understand that they had to work with Susan to accomplish the same goals, but they should have realized that they could not trust her. And speaking of not being able to trust people, Sarah immediately calls Rachel to find out what's going on, and she's not particularly helpful, and I think it becomes evident even to Sarah that she's up to no good. Meanwhile, they're watching a conference with Dr. Van Lier, taking over for Brightburn and trying to spin Evie Child's disgrace as being all her fault and having nothing to do with the company. And Crystal recognizes Van Lier as being there when Delphine was shot, so contacts Felix, who goes to Sarah, so they both go to find out what she knows. Meanwhile, we see that Ferdinand has returned in Rachel's life, and he, of course, is always up to no good. And at Brightburn, we see Evie meeting with some mysterious board of Neolution as they decide to go with clones instead of bots, and she, of course, is furious, so Van Lier basically just kills her by using her slug bot, which is pretty cliched, pretty much what I was expecting, and a bit over the top. So next we see Siobhan talking to Helena about their current problem, and apparently Donnie and Allison have been hiding out with Helena and her little igloo type camp thingy. They don't explain where Donnie and Allison's children are, who are often overlooked in the show as side unimportant characters. Anyway, Helena says she wants to help, but Siobhan says and she can't really help at the moment because they don't really know who their enemy is. However, later in the episode when Sarah goes to the island to rescue Cosima, she sure could have used Helena's help. And overall, Helena has been severely underused all season. I haven't been the biggest Helena fan, but still it felt like they kind of wasted her this season, and particularly in this episode, because I was expecting some real follow-up to the way she killed those thugs in the previous episode, but they didn't really follow up on this at all, other than saying Donnie and Allison are in hiding, which was really disappointing. And I've complained about Donnie and Allison in the past, but overall, I really like these characters as well, and was disappointed that they didn't have anything to do in this episode either. It felt like a waste. So instead of seeing great characters like MK or Helena or Allison, we get more Rachel as we see her reassert her S&M relationship with Ferdinand, which I could not possibly care less about. So, Crystal goes to the comic book store to speak to Felix and refuses to give him any information until he tells her what's going on. So he takes her down to the basement where Art is, and they tell her to brace herself as they introduce her to Sarah, who introduces herself as her clone. But Crystal insists that they look nothing alike and think that Felix and Art don't know what's going on. So I have to be upfront, I really hated this scene. It really bothered me. If I complained about how they went over the top with using Donnie for comedic effect, it is actually much worse with Crystal. For one, it's not even funny, and for another, it's completely unrealistic. I mean, I know they play Crystal as dense, but her not believing Sarah was her clone, or not even recognizing that they looked alike, is completely over the top and way too much. It would have been much more believable if Crystal's reaction was more along the lines of, "Wow, what a disgusting, sloppy version of me. You should really do something with your hair." Something like that would have been true to her character and also way more believable. On top of that, I've been waiting for forever for them to finally bring Crystal into the circle, because she keeps appearing and investigating, so they might as well just tell her what's going on. In fact, it makes no sense why they haven't. Any other clone they made, they simply tell them. And to see her not even acknowledge the fact that there's another woman who looks exactly like her really bothered me. So they could go several different ways with Crystal from here on out. They could have her disappear or go out off on her own, or they could bring her in the circle of trust. Hopefully, once confronted with Cosima, Allison, MK, and Helena, as well as Sarah, she'll be forced to acknowledge that they all look alike, which I think would be far more interesting. But the fact that Felix and Art are still misleading her by telling her her incorrect assumptions are correct might seem to suggest they will continue to string her along, which would simply annoy the crap out of me. So Crystal tells Art and Sarah and Felix about what she saw with Dr. Van Lier and how he's likely a Neolutionist, which is another no duh moment. Of course he is. But anyway, Sarah, dressing up like Crystal, goes and ambushes Dr. Van Lier at a press conference, asking him questions about Neolution and Dr. Cormier. So he takes Crystal aside and agrees to speak with her in an alley, and we see him putting on gloves. So my first impression was that he was getting ready to kill her, but then Siobhan comes out of nowhere and shoves a gun to his back and takes him to a truck where we learn it was Sarah disguised as Crystal, and they begin to interrogate him. So then we see Susan talking to Rachel about starting human cloning over the phone on a massive scale, and Cosima overhears this and finally realizes what I did as soon as Susan left the room in the first scene of the episode, that Susan is locking them out in order to begin her cloning experiments, wide scale. And like an idiot, Cosima simply confronts Susan about it and allows herself to be locked in a room, who again, who couldn't see that coming? It was so obvious to me that Susan was a threat to her. No duh. Anyway, however, we soon learn Susan isn't the only one doing the double crossing, as Rachel moves to out Susan and take over Neolution without her and cut her out entirely. So it serves Susan right as she gets a taste of her own medicine, and I think that works really well as a storytelling device as Susan gets her comeuppance for not doing the right thing. However, the whole scene where Rachel talks to the board and plots to enslave clones and use bots and clones or whatever, I thought was a bit cheesy and over the top. So anyway, Sarah deduces from her interrogation of Dr. Van Lier what's going on, and Art and Felix go to Rachel's apartment to find Ira all tied up, and Sarah gets him to cooperate since Rachel is trying to overthrow Susan. So Ira helps Sarah get to a chopper to take her to the island where they presume Rachel has gone to steal Cosima's research. So Cosima and Charlotte plan to run away to a boat as Rachel arrives and confronts Susan, and that conversation doesn't go very well and ends with Rachel stabbing Susan, which I thought was all too obvious, especially the way they played it with Rachel looking at the kitchen knives while Susan talked down to her. It was all too obvious what was going to happen. So hours later, Sarah shows up and sees a trail of blood and follows it to find Susan, who is still alive but hurt badly, and Rachel charges out of nowhere and charges at Sarah and basically kicks her ass, which includes stabbing her in the leg. Now, this is another scene that really frustrated me, as Sarah was being really incompetent here as well by simply putting the gun down as soon as she saw Susan. How stupid is that, especially when Susan starts talking about how Rachel went crazy and tried to kill her? Seems like now would be a good time to arm yourself, but whatever. So then we get another scene that bothered me, where while Rachel is beating the crap out of Sarah, Susan pulls a gun on her, but instead of shooting Rachel, she pulls the whole, "oh, you won't shoot me, I'm your daughter" card, and it actually fucking works, which is just dumb, because she just freaking stabbed you! Who cares if it's your daughter or protege or whatever, she's trying to kill you! Even presuming that she wouldn't kill Rachel, she should have at least shot at her or injured her somehow. She just tried to freaking kill her. In fact, Susan could still die as far as she knows. At this point anyway. It's not completely unbelievable that she wouldn't shoot her own daughter, but it's frustrating and not particularly good storytelling. So, Sarah stumbles out in the open after being injured and calls Siobhan for help, only to find out that Ferdinand is holding her and Kira at gunpoint. Dun dun dun! I suppose they just need to raise the stakes as much as they can for the finale, but I'm not a fan. So, let me talk about the bearded guy that Rachel has been seeing in her visions, and how he finds Cosima and Charlotte freezing in the cold, who got lost on the way to the boat, and he takes them back to the mysterious village that Charlotte said they were never meant to go to. Anyway, we learn from Susan when she talks to Rachel after she patches her up that the bearded guy is in fact the creator of Neolution, the one who wrote the book, that they've been talking about all season, that's been written over a century ago. So yeah, not too far-fetched someone involved with weird genetic science would find a way to live for a long time. But yeah, I wasn't blown away by this information either. I wasn't impressed. But I wasn't like, oh my god, I can't believe this guy from those visions I didn't care about is the same guy who wrote that book I didn't care about. I mean, don't get me wrong, I didn't hate this revelation, but I wasn't particularly interested in it either. So I really don't know what the deal with this guy is, as when Rachel shows up to talk to Susan, he told her not to waver, but then we see that he was the one who saved Delphine and has now saved Cosima and Charlotte's lives, so I really don't know what his deal is. By the way, it was touching to see a Cosima and Delphine reunion, but apparently it's short-lived as that guy warns her that she can't stay long. So then the episode ends with Mr. Westmoreland going to see Rachel, and I'm saying, I can't say that I'm particularly interested in seeing that. I mean, it's okay, but it wasn't a particularly good cliffhanger ending. So my rating for From Dancing Mice to Psychopaths out of 10 is a 6 good. Now I'm sure some people will think that rating is rather high, as much as I've been bashing this episode throughout this review. However, you need to understand, I only did that because I was disappointed in this as a finale, especially a finale for a season that has overall been extremely good and one of the best that this show has ever produced. As an episode itself, it was fine, and a 6 rating is a positive rating, although the lowest positive rating I have. But, that's what I thought of it. It was good. But the problem is that for a finale of a season that's been as good as this one, a 6 is unacceptable. The finale should be at the very least an 8, and preferably a 9 or a 10, as a strong season should have a strong ending. So I'm sorry, but I was thoroughly disappointed that it didn't live up to the potential that this season has had. So that's it for my review of From Dancing Mice to Psychopaths. Be sure to check me out tomorrow. That's Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US, which is Sunday 11 a.m. for me here in New Zealand, as I do a live discussion video with Geeksiders over on their channel, where we discuss Season 4 of Orphan Black. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion. I've done live discussion videos with Josh and Anna from Geeksiders before, and it's always a lot of fun. It'll be great to delve into what I thought, well, despite its subpar finale, was a great season of television. So be sure to check that out. I'll leave a link in the description below for that video. I'll also be doing my own full-length review of Season 4 of Orphan Black around the same time next week, as well as many more videos on other shows such as Game of Thrones, Star Trek, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.